gentlemen, Mr. Stephen Williams, Commissioner of Police, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, all senior members of TTPS officers, Dr. Faisal Ali, Senior Vice President and Provost UTT, Professor Lawrence Sherman, Director, Institute of Criminology, University of Cambridge, and today's keynote speaker, Mr. Eston Stephen, Public Sector Director of Microsoft Trinidad and Tobago, Eastern and Southern Caribbean, Dr. Patton, Program Leader, Institute of Criminology and Public Safety, UTT, Dr. Mohammed, Institute of Criminology and Public Safety, Ms. Lal, Institute of Criminology and Public Safety, members of the Ministry of Education, the Pan America Foundation, other NGOs, ladies and gentlemen, specially invited guests, media, good afternoon. Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I know how it can be on the afternoon, but I am not one, unfortunately, who likes the podium and not see the mic.
You don't need a mic.
So, there we go. So forgive me for deviating from the norm. Allow me to walk. Right, welcome, yes. So my name is Hanif Benjamin. I am the President and CEO of the Center for Human Development, Psychological Counseling and Training and Development Company, specializing in trauma treatment and looking at trauma in general. So given the opportunity to present here today, I was extremely excited to speak to you today about crisis of mental health within the protective services, but in special relation to trauma. Thank you. There we go. So let me start by putting things into context for you. A depressed policeman allegedly committed suicide at the Faizabad police station minutes after calling his wife on her cell phone, telling her he wanted to come home to her. A 24-year-old soldier committed suicide by shooting himself through the head early yesterday morning at 1st Battalion Headquarters, Camp Ogden, Long Circular Road, St. James, 2003. A prison officer was shot and killed over a domestic dispute. His wife never recovered from the heartbreak over the death of her common law husband, and on the 12th of August took her own life by ingesting a toxic substance. Her daughter attempted suicide 1 month later. So ladies and gentlemen, let me first by saying to you there is a crisis. And if we have not been looking closely, we're going to just skim over what is ideally a crisis within our protective services. I have said to you, looking at all three major areas of our protective services where we have seen over time serious traumatic incidents within the family and community. National security personnel are subject to a greater psychological stress than many other occupations. We all agree with that, correct? Paradoxically, self-care and the system of support for these officers are considerably taxed, not only because of the nature of their job, but also what happens after the events. And this is what I want to talk to you today about. Research has shown that conflict between the family and work can be a source of occupational stress. Research has also shown that social support provided by members of the work and the family domain can have a positive influence on workers' general health and well-being. I indicated to you that there is a crisis. There exists a gap between the stress of the officer, one, the stress upon the system, the support system, two, and how the officer within the occupation can positively manage these stressors. The gap is the crisis as more tragedies will continue. And I can say to you today, in looking at our current system and what officers face, I mean, last night when I was perusing the papers on my way back to Trinidad, I saw police routine patrol. What happened? What happened? Anybody can tell me? Anyone? What happened? An ambush, they were riddled with bullets. They had to duck and take cover. And they had to fire just yesterday. So it tells us that the crisis continues to grow and grow and grow. So the impact of burnout and vicarious traumatization upon the protective services. Everyone who starts out an occupation, such as police officers, army officers, firefighters, or paramedics, may reasonably expect to be confronted sooner or later with emotional distressing, shocking, and potentially traumatic events. The public says that to us every day, but that is what they signed up for. Well, they knew that when we came in. Continuous exposure to these events may seem to make an officer better trained to deal with trauma. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you today that this is a myth. This is totally untrue. Being exposed to trauma daily in no way makes you ready, makes you able to deal with it. And that is a myth we must get out. That is a myth we must tell the public who thinks every day you go into a situation, you should know how to deal with it by now. There is no remedy once you are not dealing with it in a positive way to manage trauma. So for us to believe that when our protective services are inundated with traumatic events, every day they should be able to deal with it or they sign up for it is a myth. And we must debunk that myth. The impact, fire officers, police soldiers, and emergency medical personnel consist of individuals who have been educated to believe that crime is a sign of weakness. They have become more experts in stifling pain, hiding emotion with black humor and cynicism as the only outlet. We tend to wonder why it is our protective services always seem to be traversing a line. Or we always confuse with the type of humor. We call them coping mechanisms in my world. We develop coping mechanisms to see if we can make it a little easier. Not understanding that we are not ideally managing the various traumas that you experience on a daily basis. We don't even understand by coming to work, suiting up, and going on a patrol is trauma in itself. Especially in a society where you're not sure what's going to happen. So it means that you're going to be under constant hypervigilance. It means that you will always, hypervigilance can be broken down to mean you're always ready, you're jumpy, in Trinidad terms. You're always looking out. So when that happens, what do you think is going to be the natural line? You're ready to snap at any moment. So when you put trauma in the mix of hypervigilance, what do you think is going to happen? We see it on the news every day. We experience it every single day. Let's look at the impact on some of the police officers. Within the organization characteristic, lack of supervision, excessive paperwork, poor equipment, criminal justice practices, unfavorable court decision, recidivism, adversarial nature of the justice system, public practices, distorted press account of police work, allegation of brutality and racism, adverse local government decisions such as funding. Let's look at some of the public practices. The police works itself. Let me just pull this up real quick. Role conflict ascertain their rights, irregular work schedule, danger inherent with the profession, inability to resolve and cause many problems within the community. You know, we don't understand how these things affect police. I remember I was having a training with police officers, and one of the points came from that training when the police said to me, he investigated the case, was it 4 years? 4 years, approximately. Intense investigation. Brought the matter before the court, and on a technicality, a legal technicality, the case was thrown out. Now the case was going on, so he investigated for 4, the case was going on for about 4, and a technicality threw it out. No one asked that officer how he felt. No one understood the impact it had on him. No one understood the level of trauma he was facing internally. No one knew he wanted to give up because the system don't make sense to him. But we keep it moving. Let's look at the impact on the army. Isolation, remote location, distance from family and friends, newly configured units do not understand co-workers, ambiguity, unclear rules of engagement, role confusion, example within hotspots, and we have seen this displayed over the years. Powerlessness, movement restriction, police preventing intervention and providing help. Boredom, repetitive tasks, sometimes few options for play or entertainment. Let's look at our fire officers. 24-hour shift work, irregular work hours, lack of proper sleep cycle, absenteeism, increased workloads on others, disrupt workplace relationship, general shortage of staff, lack of support from supervisors and administrative departments, faulty age equipment. When we keep looking at these things, it leads us to look at the cost. And the cost, ladies and gentlemen, is on 2 sides. And I need for you to understand where this is coming from. The first side, I want you to look at the cost to the public, and then the cost to the individual, the officers or the people in the protective services, the members. And I want you to just throw your mind with me, if you can. Vacation years, sick leave. Then I want you to look at the cost to the community. You see, because we keep asking the questions over and over and over. And I'm trying to figure out if we're not understanding the link between the psychological well-being and the performance of duty. I wonder if we are understanding the link between the psychological well-being and how it is linked to the performance of duty. Because if I can't sleep, I can't perform. If I'm tired, I'm not able to think. Two ways in which psychological stress manifests is through burnout and vicarious trauma. Let's look at vicarious traumatization. Vicarious traumatization, or VT, is defined as a negative effects of caring about and caring for others. It is not the same as burnout. Vicarious traumatization is feeling the pain and the hurt as if you were part of the trauma. I want you to understand that link. This morning the presenters were talking about first responders. I was called, let me give you the story real quick. I was called to a bar on a Sunday. First of all, I don't do bars, and secondly, I don't do them on a Sunday. But I just but when I got a call my friend who is a fire officer, I had no choice but to break both rules for the love of helping. When I got to the bar, he was on puncheon number, whatever it was. I don't drink puncheon either. Take a drink now, Benji, take a drink now, Benji. I said, oh God, nah, I'm going to take a water, I'm going to take a water. I took a water, by the way. So I said, what's going on? But I realized he keep taking some quicker shots quicker than I thought what was normal. So I knew he needed to talk. The first thing to me is that it was unfortunate that his form of therapy was Sunday in a bar, drinking puncheon. And he felt the need to call me while I'm grateful that he reached out to me. I was very concerned as to the others who don't know me. Who are they reaching out to? But as we continue to talk and the puncheon giving him the courage that he needs, he said, I can't do this no more now. He said, I have any dreams? I have any dreams? I said, well, tell him about his dreams. I only seen pieces, body pieces. He lives in South, and he's responsible up to, I think it's Claxton Bay, or a little bit further than Claxton Bay, on the highway that is coming, I didn't know they had areas, but I learned that day. And he said, every time I go to Port of Spain, I take the Southern Main Road. I couldn't understand why. I said, the main road had traffic. He said, because every time I drive on that highway, I break down at every spot that I scrape my body off the highway. And he said, I keep getting these dreams every night with this body parts. He said, my wife jumps up when I'm screaming. They don't understand. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what to do. Vicarious traumatization. When the police go out there to cut down the body who hung themselves, when the police go out there and the shooting and the body is there, they have to deal with that. They have to then go home to their families to be normal, to their sons or daughters. And then we try to understand domestic violence and abuse. Let's talk about it today. Because we must understand how vicarious trauma interferes on a daily basis. I had an officer told me they went up in the hills until there was a shootout. They came back down. They had a debriefing. And the inspector said, so what time are we going back out? I was just shut up. Did you not see a bullet fly? We had a 10-minute debriefing, make sure everything is copacetic because you had to make the call. But then they didn't second. So, all they got back out. The officer called me.
There's a shooting up there.
Your finger jumpy. And we don't understand. You see, the public not understanding when I go out there is because I go home and you go home. You see? And I want to go home. So something had happened. We're not understanding how vicarious trauma influences our response. We're not understanding how vicarious trauma I get a little confused with that saying. I thought I had 40 minutes, but apparently. So let me run through quick then, defining the cost. Burnout. I want you to understand that from vicarious trauma leads to then burnout. And then if I ask a question in here, but I want for field supervisor, how many of you burnt out, you're tired, you're fed up, you're frustrated, put up your hand. I know in my hand everybody will put up their hand, but she's waving. She's waving. Two hands, she's waving. Burnout is the index of the dislocation between what people are and what they have to do. It represents an erosion of values, dignity, spirit, and will. It's an erosion of the human soul. When you want to do well, when you want to come to work and do your best, but you're unable to, because you're so tired, your mind is so warped, you feel empty. Nobody wants to go to work and not work. Well, you don't know. Let me be careful. The dual perils of VT and burnout are hard to separate because one leads to the other. You work 4 and you come back and then they're telling you they're working another 4. I tell people I live in San Fernando and I always have to go through the link up to go home, to turn left. And I always appreciate having roadblocks. I think it is effective, right? But what I don't appreciate is lifestyle insurance. You didn't chase me. I was not absconding. It is a routine roadblock, so there's no need to shout at me. But then, when you had already tell your girlfriend, your husband, your boyfriend, your wife, your children are coming home later, and you're ready to go home, and then you get a notice, hey, they want you to go down so because you have an exercise. I have to pay for that now. Lifestyle insurance. You understand? I have to pay for that now. So we're not understanding the link. You understand? I don't make this work here. So let me get to this part, which is why we're here today. Breaking boundaries. If it can never be enough that we sit and wait until officers are in crisis or suicidal before we act. We have to do something before they get there. And that is why I am here. Traditionally, our protective services have enlisted EAP and other therapeutic services. The time has come for a paradigm shift, an integrative therapeutic system within the various services. I'm not talking about our normal EAP, you know. When I was living and working in the United States, in Westchester, I was part of a mental health team that was specific to the police department. Clinical debriefings. You see, we say we go into debriefing, but it's administrative debriefing rarely, you know. I'm talking about clinical debriefing to make sure that your mind is sound and ready to, as the inspector said, or they're going back out. Because we run the risk of going back out, hyper, and causing more harm than good. You understand? I am talking about a system of care that is going to provide psychological and counseling service specific to trauma and trauma-related issues. I see you, sir. I see you. I see you. Training and development. And this morning I was happy when I saw the research. I love research. I don't like doing them, but I love it. And what I learned, especially in the police training college, the need to begin serious trauma-informed work from day one. One, to understand how trauma affects you, and 2, to understand how trauma affects community. Because you don't understand when you go there in a child situation, my son just got shot. Why did he kill 15 people? That son that he was the best son I had. We must now understand the trauma that they are going through and what is going through their mind. And if we don't understand what is going through their mind, we cannot solve the problem. I was part of the team in Westchester where every time a crisis occurred, one of our crisis responders was deployed with the police to help manage the crisis. So training becomes critical, and we must start from the beginning, from the time you come in. We must begin to look at mental illness as a real challenge within our system. I did some training for the police service some time ago. And I asked the question, if I was to do a psychological assessment, I could diagnose everyone in that room with having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or acute stress disorder. Everyone would have been diagnosed. That's a sad reality. But what is even more sad is what we are doing to manage this. Because we must understand, if our officers, if our protective services are not ready, our society feels the pain. And if our society feels the pain, then the divide between society and the to get wider and wider and wider. So we need to, and I'm a little disappointed that I'm not seeing any khakis here, right? Because this slide is what I really want us to pay attention to. The development of a clear mental health policy that would govern all of the protective services. This would govern the continuum of care from the time you come in relation to training and development, so that you can understand mental health, you can understand trauma, to going out there and practicing it. Not only for yourself, but also for the society. So as I wrap up, there are areas mentioned above are in alignment with the work that we do, the development of a trauma-focused core to address core trauma services, additional emphasis on individual/organizational partnership with regards to EAP, rather than adversarial going beyond the fixing the employee, but bringing holistic development to the forefront. Ladies and gentlemen, it was indeed a pleasure to be here, right?
Thank you, Dr. Hanif.
Oh, I'm not quite yet, I'm getting there. All medias, I'm not a doctor yet.
Well, from your presentation, I surely was fooled. And now, this is the question and answer time. 2 questions, please.
C.C.T. You are aware in the brochure, Commissioner, the acting commissioner it states he has 36 years service without taking 1 day sick leave. So I'm kind of confused. Given that presentation that was very informative as to how our commissioner, this is a typo. Anybody here, this has to be a typo. Because I'm really confused. Because we have a culture in Trinidad where managers and employers, they more or less put a fear in employees, with regards to taking a day sick leave. And, most times people think in our society that is being productive when you come to work. But a lot of people, you're functioning, but you're really functioning. So I really would like for this to be addressed and cleared up before I leave this evening. This information, that's all I want to get cleared up.
You would have to speak to administrative services, HR, read his sick leave. But what I can tell you is that while there are outliners, as with any research, and you would always know there are outliners, the general premise of what I'm speaking about is for the wider police service. So I'm hoping that would clear. But in terms of his sick leave, I'm not sure if there are any HR representatives here.
So Benjamin, let me congratulate you on your course.
Thank you very much, sir.
Maybe that question should be directed to the Commission itself, suggesting that gentlemen have a talk with the Commissioner. But let me also say, as a former police officer, police officers in Trinidad probably is the toughest in the world. And I imagine your research would have probably looked at Jamaica, where there are high incidents of suicide, and of course the US. But fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know if it's because of our fatigue culture, we have not been able to have a high incidence of suicide. Well, let me say that, did you consider in your research classism, which we, as opposed to racism in Trinidad, and the unequal justice meted out to some people? The question of the high crime environment, which we would colloquially call hotspot policing, and how it brings about a particular kind of mentality in terms of response in terms of juxtaposing the high crime with the response of the officer. Looking at the whole question of trauma and how does the male as opposed to the female officer would treat with situations. But congratulations on your discourse, and certainly I think it's a work in progress.
Thank you. Let me see if I can break it down real quick before the guy put up the notice again. First thing, in the research, Jamaica, in terms of suicidality, yes, it's very high. But when you look at Trinidad and Tobago, what we found, or what the research is showing in terms of domestic crimes, right? When I say domestic crimes, we're talking about domestic violence, other types of abuse within the home, and we're also talking about a heightened risk behavior. For example, you find that we might visit different types of houses, right, that might not be too legal, right? Or you're talking about the use of substance or other things that would help cope with. And I like the term when you talk about fatigue, because we're a fatigue nation where we tend to bully people via fatigue, and we crouch it under, oh, it's just fatigue, but we're really bullying people. So you find that men particularly don't speak out, but it comes out in their line of duty. You understand? Just like the guy, lifestyle insurance, that experience that I had personally speaks to, right, the stress that they're going through that they're not able to speak about because, again, the rank system as well as fatigue. So you find mental health is something, or even dealing with situations like that is something that is really, really high. But I tell people, if we are honest with ourselves, we look at the end result and you will see it every day. The third part of the question, I think you spoke about, what was that? Gender. There is a gender disparity. First of all, I must say that even today, women police officers who are female, because I need to be very careful, I don't like, still have and dealing with serious segregation issues, right? While we look at a lot of police in the high-ranking part of the service, female police officers, there are still female officers that are still dealing with that, the machismo and female type of situation. But naturally, females have been able to manage traumatic incidents better than males. Why? The reason is they are more vocal. Basic things that females can do is talk to one another. They have a different type of network. And one of the basic ways is talking through things. We don't do that. We can't do that. Society doesn't allow us males to do that. So females tend to fare better because they get off the chest, they cuss too cuss, they talk to their girlfriend, they talk to this one, and they deal with situations. Unlike males, we hold it in and it comes out through different means. Unfortunately, those means are what we need to get rid of. So I guess the deeper question though, sir, is the beginning of the conversation today and the continuation of the conversation as to how can we seriously address mental issues, address psychological trauma within the protective services throughout. I'm talking about when you look at the military, the serious situation that is going on there in terms of men being away from their family for an extended period, right? You're talking about now domestic issues when they go back home, relationship issues, trust issues that are not being ventilated. And that in itself is creating serious problem in carrying out the duty. If I come to work and can't concentrate on work because I need to concentrate on what's going on home, am I ready at work? You see my point? So those are some of the conversations, and I'm glad that you raised that point, that I am hoping that we can continue to develop.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanif.